In 1759, on Mauritius Island, the body of a slave falls into the sea. As she drowns, she prays for her husband, Massamba, never to give up and to save their people. The next day, a group of slaves, including Massamba, works on a plantation owned by Eugène. There are only 2 weeks left until harvest, so Eugène tells Massamba to watch over the other slaves and make sure no one is being lazy. Eugène calls Massamba Cicero instead of his real name, which makes another slave see Massamba as a traitor. That night, Massamba teaches his daughter, Mati, how to read and write. During the lesson, Mati tells him that her friend Ruba showed her a southwest path leading to Fiumi, a village where runaway slaves hide. Mati wants to escape, but Massamba says no, telling her Fiumi is just a myth. The danger of running away becomes clear when they see a guard capturing a slave outside. The next morning, Eugène and his guards catch another slave who tried to escape. Since it was her first attempt, they burn her back with a mark shaped like a lily flower. They warn that if she tries to escape again, they will cut off her ears and tendons. Massamba has to translate this warning for the other slaves while they watch a man lose his ears because he was caught trying to escape a second time. Eugène then tells Massamba to remind all the slaves that a third escape attempt will be punished with death. Later that night, Massamba finds Mati having a panic attack after one of the guards hurt her. He holds her tightly and helps her calm down by praying with her. After she feels better, Mati insists they should kill their masters and run away. She says the other slaves will follow Massamba as their leader, but Massamba still refuses and calls Mati Colette, a name she hates. Mati doesn't want to lose her culture, but Massamba cares more about her future. He hopes that if she fits in with the colonizers, she might get a job as a seamstress far away from the plantation. Sometime later, Massamba is called to the main house where Eugène is having dinner with some very important people. The governor knows Massamba can speak both languages and asks him to help understand the slaves. He asks Massamba if black people should be freed, but Massamba, too scared to speak the truth, says that black people exist only to serve. When Massamba looks up to speak, the governor gets offended, and Eugène quickly kicks Massamba out of the room. Eugène's son, Honore, explains that he was the one who trained Massamba, because Massamba grew up on the plantation and quickly understood that some slaves were trying to rebel. Teaching Massamba made Honore believe that black people are human too. The governor brings up Madame la Victoire, a woman who hunts down runaway slaves and has the opposite views. This starts an argument about how slaves should be treated, and Eugène has to silence Honore to avoid causing trouble. However, the governor now thinks Eugène isn't doing a good job of ruling the area. After the governor leaves, Eugène slaps Honore for sharing his controversial opinions. Then he calls Massamba and tells him he's losing all his special privileges. Massamba will now have to cut cane like the other slaves and won't be allowed to live with his daughter, Mati. Mati will stay under Eugène's roof, and if Massamba tries to argue, Eugène will kill her. When Mati hears about this, she tries to hurt herself, but Massamba stops her and sends her to the house. Moments later, Massamba hears dogs barking and people screaming. He runs outside and finds a guard on fire, but Mati is nowhere to be seen. The other guards tell him Mati ran away and send him back to his room. The next morning, the guards tell Eugène they couldn't find Mati. Eugène orders them to call Madame la Victoire and tells Honore to join the hunt to fix the family's reputation. Honore reluctantly agrees, but asks his father to treat Mati better when they bring her back. After that, Massamba is tied to the ground and whipped for several minutes to make him talk, but he truly doesn't know where Mati went. At that moment, Madame la Victoire arrives with her sons, Joseph and Baptiste. She refuses Eugène's money and asks for details about Mati's escape. Victoire tries to interrogate Massamba, saying she'll bring Mati back alive because she believes in punishment, but Massamba swears he knows nothing. Then they bring in Mati's friend, Ruba, who is pregnant. They dig a hole in the ground for her belly before tying her up. They only need to whip Ruba's feet once before she tells them Mati went looking for the Fiumi village. Victoire has heard of the legend before and immediately leaves with her sons and Honore to start searching. Using Mati's clothes, a dog follows her scent through the forest until Victoire finds marks on the ground that show Mati met someone and left with them. A few hours later, the group notices there are no more tracks to follow, but they can see a hill in the distance. They decide to climb to the top and watch to see if anyone comes out of hiding. Back at the plantation, Masamba has been locked in a tiny cell with a chain mask around his head. He begs Ruba for help, but she ignores him. When the workday ends, Ruba throws food to the dogs to keep them quiet. Later that night, she sneaks around and frees Massamba from the cell before rushing back to her room. With the dogs asleep, Massamba manages to run through the fields without being caught. The next morning, Victoire's sons think Mati is gone and they're wasting time, but Victoire insists they need to be patient. Meanwhile, Massamba reaches the forest and stops by the river to drink, which is hard because of the mask. After hitting the lock with a rock for several minutes, he finally breaks it and takes the mask off. Using branches to create shade under the bright sun, he finds the right direction to continue searching for his daughter. That night, Victoire scolds Honore for eating like a black savage and forces all the boys to pray. She explains that God has always been her guide and saved her in her darkest times. Honore already knows her story. She was abused as a child, forced into an unwanted marriage as a teenager, and became the first woman on the island to get a divorce. He thinks she's the only person on the island who understands the horrors slaves go through and should feel sympathy for them. But Victoire insists that the church has proven black people have no souls. She says it's not her place to question the church, though Honore can tell she has doubts. During the night, Massamba dreams that his wife is by his side. The next day, Massamba starts climbing the hill and is spotted by Victoire. As he wanders through the trees, he hears a noise and finds a black man named Kabedi, who guides him. There's also a black woman with a baby, and together they all hide from Victoire's group, who have entered the woods to search for them. Suddenly, the baby starts crying, and Baptiste hears them. The slaves have to run as fast as they can, but they can't go far. Kabedi tells the mother to hide and gives Massamba one of his blades. When Baptiste gets close enough, he fires his gun, but the slaves dodge the shot, and Massamba tackles him to the ground. Baptiste fights back as Massamba tries to knock him out, but Massamba freezes when Honore suddenly calls his name and tells him to surrender. Just then, Kabedi appears behind Honore and quickly kills him by slashing his neck. Kabedi tells Massamba to do the same to Baptiste, but Massamba can't bring himself to kill him, so he runs away instead. Joseph starts chasing Massamba, who runs as fast as he can until a black man named Rado tackles him and helps him find a hiding spot. Once Joseph leaves, the two men keep moving, and Rado explains he's also searching for the Fiumi village. They stop at a cave where Rado shares the little food he has and gives Massamba a fresh shirt. Rado tells his story. He used to fight for France and was even made a citizen. But when he came to the island, they burned his freedom papers and tried to force him into slavery. Meanwhile, Victoire is taking care of Honore's body. Baptiste points out that the slaves spared him, acting like good Christians, but his family doesn't take his words well. Victoire spends most of the night praying. In the morning, she says the Lord is protecting them, so they must continue the hunt. However, Baptiste refuses to go after the man who spared his life and decides to take Honore's body back to his father instead. A furious Joseph attacks Baptiste, and the two brothers start fighting on the ground while Victoire watches without intervening. After a few minutes, Baptiste wins the fight and leaves the forest with Honore's body. Meanwhile, Massamba is on the move again, following tracks on the ground and plants to find his daughter. When Rado tries to leave the cave, Joseph shoots him in the leg to stop him. Joseph then squeezes Rado's wound while he and Victoire demand information about Mati and Massamba. Rado refuses to talk and says the island belongs to black people, so Victoire shoots him in the head. Victoire and Joseph search the cave and find Massamba's old shirt, which allows the dog to follow his scent. In just a few minutes, the dog finds Massamba crossing the river and attacks him, not realizing there's a waterfall behind them. Both Massamba and the dog fall into the lake below the waterfall. Massamba tries to swim away as fast as he can, but the dog catches up and bites his arm. Screaming in pain, Massamba pushes the dog off and grabs a rock to smash its head, killing it. At the top of the waterfall, Joseph and Victoire see Massamba escape into the woods. For the next few hours, Massamba keeps wandering through the forest, following any tracks he can find. Eventually, he has to stop and rest because he's losing too much blood from his wound. Meanwhile, Victoire and Joseph continue searching in the rain and find a clue when they notice blood on a tree. That night, Massamba dreams about his wife again. She encourages him, gives him her blessing, and promises to guide him. The next day, Massamba reaches the beach and finds the bodies of dead slaves on the sand and in the water. There's also a destroyed boat, which means a storm stopped them from escaping to Madagascar. Masamba checks every body on the shore but doesn't find Mati, so he goes back into the woods. He follows a strange noise and finds a few survivors. He asks them about Mati before collapsing in pain and tears. The men help him up and take him to a cave near the beach where the women are hiding. There, he finally finds Mati and runs to hug her, but she doesn't react much at first. Masamba then tells her he'll help her find Fibumi, which makes Mati smile and finally hug him back. After Masamba and Mati leave together, Victoire and Joseph also reach the beach and find all the bodies. Victoire and Joseph follow Masamba's footprints on the sand to continue their hunt, forcing Masamba and Mati to hide again. Mati says she's tired of hiding, and Masamba agrees it's time to make a plan. That night, Masamba performs a traditional ritual to renew his promise to his wife and asks for courage to fight his enemies. As the moonlight shines on him, Masamba hears his wife's voice saying they are now one, and then it starts to rain. Meanwhile, Victoire and Joseph are camping for the night. Victoire hears a noise and pushes Joseph down, just as a blade swings at them in the dark. Mother and son grab their weapons and stumble around, trying to find the attacker. Suddenly, Joseph hears a noise and fires his gun, revealing his position. Masamba slashes him with a blade and hides again. Victoire runs to her son and sees he's in terrible pain, so she stabs him to end his suffering. Then she hides behind a tree, only to come out when she sees Masamba nearby. Using the lightning as cover, Victoire sneaks up behind Masamba and shoots him in the shoulder. She grabs her knife to kill him, but when she looks up, he's gone. Terrified, Victoire starts praying until Masamba appears behind her and stabs her to death. That night, Masamba dreams of his wife appearing before Eugène and killing him with a spear. In the morning, Mati has to wake her father from his trance and help him walk because of his injuries. But Masamba is too dizzy and collapses again. Mati breaks down, falling to her knees and yelling for help. Her cries attract a group of slaves who have also escaped Eugène's plantation and are searching for Fibumi. Mati joins them, and the men help carry Masamba as they continue their journey. After hours of wandering through the woods, they finally find the mythical Fibumi village near the hills. A healer quickly makes an ointment and applies it to Masamba's wounds while praying. This helps Masamba heal and move without pain again. That night, the villagers welcome Masamba and Mati into their community. They talk about the differences in their cultures, as many of the villagers were born on the island, not in Africa. Masamba shares stories about his tribe and how his wife was killed on a colonizer's ship because she refused to be a slave. Mati also tells stories her mother used to share and how she smiled at her daughter before her death. The next day, while bathing in the lake, Mati sees her mother watching her from afar. In the evening, the villagers see flames in the distance, meaning hunters are coming for them. Everyone starts running as the white men open fire and capture some of the slaves. They cross a huge field, but find their path blocked by a cliff, allowing the colonizers to surround them. Using a slave as a translator, a man tells them the governor has promised to spare their lives if they surrender. Masamba says he wants a life with no chains and no masters, inspiring Mati to start singing a traditional song. The villagers join in, singing together before choosing to end their lives rather than return to slavery.